Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to almost spring. In just a few hours, it'll be officially spring. I want to thank you all for coming. As Sadia said, we are Wild Ones. For those of you who don't know, we are Wild Ones of Greater Kane County, and we are all about native plants and native landscaping, sustainable landscaping. And our motto is connecting people and native plants for a healthy planet. We are a local chapter of a national organization which is based in Wisconsin. So we're so happy to have you all be coming. Um, so this is our last installment of this year's series all about water. And this is our fourth year to do these series. So it's been an exciting adventure, and we don't know what we'll be doing next year, but we will be doing something. Thank you so much to the Gale Bourne Library, who's been such a wonderful partner with us and hosting these shows for us, and also to the Elgin Sustainability Commission, and of course the Conservation Foundation, of which Jessica, our speaker, is works for them. So they've been a wonderful partner for us as well. I just want to go over briefly. We have a lot of events coming up for spring and summer with Wild Ones. We are going to have a speaker on March 28th, which is a week from Thursday. Jeff Weiss will be at the Baker Community Center in St. Charles, where we have had a number of our programs. And he's going to be speaking on babbling brooks and what they can teach us. Then we're going to have 8 spring ephemeral walks all around the county, led by Wild Ones members. We're going to be at Bluff Spring Fen, Norris Woods, Trout Park, Johnson's Mound, Dick Young, Tekakwitha, Wildflower Sanctuary, and Bliss Woods. And that's all posted on our website, on the Facebook page, and will be on our website as well. And if you get our newsletter, it's in the newsletter as well. As you might know, April is Earth Month. There are a lot of events in April. On April 8th, our friends at Dundee Township Open Space is having a solar eclipse picnic. On April 15th, we're having a 13th, I'm sorry, presentation at Hawthorne Hill Nature Center in the afternoon. April 20th, there's Earth Day at the Elgin Sustainability Commission Summit, and you're going to have a booth there. There are 2 tree plantings, one at Raceway Woods on April 20th and one at Elburn Forest Reserve. There's also an Earth Day event at Peck Farm in Geneva from 11 to 2. And very importantly, our plant sale is coming up on May 18th at Gray Willows Farm from 9 to 2. So watch for more information about that. This is our 3rd year there, so we're really happy to have it there, and it's a great place, and we get wonderful plants. But I also need to mention a lot of our partners are having native plant sales too. Forest Preserve Foundation is April 27th from 8 to 12. St. Charles Park District, June 9th, 9 to 2. Batavia Plain Dirt Gardeners, May 11th. And they don't have all native plants, but they have about half native plants, I've been told. And of course, the Conservation Foundation is also on May 11th, and that's at McDonald Farm in Naperville. And they will also have rain barrels, organic vegetables, and honey available there. On April 25th, also, the Conservation Foundation is having their annual fundraiser, always a great event. Jean, Nancy, and I are going to be giving a Learn from the Experts presentation on June 1st, all about starting your yard. June 29th, we're going to have a field trip to Medewan. On August 10th, a field trip to Dayton Bluffs. August 22nd, Pam Otto is going to do a presentation on bats. September 1st, we're going to visit Wings and Talons in Itasca. And on September 26th, Ben Haberther, director of King County Forest Preserve, will be doing a presentation on the bison at Burlington Prairie and also the future of the Forest Preserve. We're going to have 2 garden tours, which we haven't arranged yet, but we will let you know. I'm sure you all didn't get those down on all your notes while I was talking really fast, but I just want to say, if you have any questions, go to gkwildones@gmail.com if any questions, and you can go look on our Facebook page, on our website, and on Instagram. So I'm going to turn it over to Jean Muntz.
Thank you, Kim. I got all those. Okay, tonight we're welcoming back a previous year's presenter, Jessica Mino from the Conservation Foundation, where she serves as the program director for Kane and Kendall counties. She too is a native plant gardener, and along with her husband is fixing up an almost 100-year-old farmhouse with plans to convert several acres into prairie habitat. Jessica has been and continues to be a cheerleader for our Start in Your Yard initiative, rendering major support and encouragement over the last 4 years. When you read her bio on our startinyyouryard.com website, you will see how Jessica's background in native plant gardening, in civil engineering, in environmental conservation provides her the very qualifications needed to speak on the topic tonight. How, by starting in our yard, there might be life-sustaining practices we could adopt to take pressure off the Earth's circulatory system as it flows within our watershed, our precious waterways, and beyond. Jessica.
Thank you so much, Jean. What a lovely introduction. I'm really excited to be here tonight to talk to you all about plants in water, two of my very favorite things. So yes, let's get started. I'm going to screen share here. There we go. Now you should all be seeing it. All right. Just the advance isn't working, but we'll get there. There we go. Okay, so this evening I'll kind of start out by just telling you who the Conservation Foundation is, so you know who's here talking tonight. We'll do a brief overview of what a watershed is in our watershed. Very brief. I know this is part of a 3-part series, and that was covered very well in the previous 2 presentations. But just in case anybody didn't catch those, or just to ground it in a different way, what we're talking about here today, we'll cover that. And then what we're mainly going to focus on is things that you can do at home, including pollution reduction, but also keeping the rain where it falls. We'll talk about what that means and why it's so important. And this includes water conservation and our role of our plants. And then things you can also do in your community. But this is really focused on all about you and how you can help contribute to clean water and a great environment for all of us tonight. So the mission of the Conservation Foundation is to improve the health of our communities by preserving and restoring natural areas and open space, protecting rivers and watersheds, and promoting stewardship of our environment. We mostly do our work in Kane, Kendall, DuPage, and Will counties, but we also do some work in the surrounding counties as there's gaps or needs that we need to fill in for. And over the past 50+ years that this organization's been working, we've been able to help preserve 36,000 acres throughout the area. Not sure if that advanced. It's still, it was all working great in the trial, so we'll just keep trying here. Okay, there we go. And so when I say, okay, we're preserving lands, but why? Why do we want to preserve lands? And really that's to preserve our quality of life and all the communities throughout the area that we serve and around the Fox River here specifically. So protecting our lands really helps protect our water quality. This is what we're going to mostly talk about tonight, and our drinking water, specifically for communities around the Fox River, like Elgin, who gets most of their drinking water from the Fox River itself. That's very important. Protecting our land helps support our air quality, our wildlife habitat, and create opportunities for people to enjoy the outdoors, specifically for our mental and physical well-being. We saw the importance of that here through COVID and the time after. The outdoors were really a place of solace and healing for a lot of people during that time. And we also feel like we have a responsibility to future generations to be doing this, so they have the same resources, if not hopefully better, that we have today. So we believe that every person, regardless of where they live or their socioeconomic status, deserves clean water, clean air, and safe access to nature, I'm sorry, as a way to be healthy and happy. And that's really what we're working for each and every day. But tonight we're going to focus on that water piece of what we do. So let's start with the Fox River watershed. As a reminder, a watershed is an area of land that's rainfall drains to a specific body of water. We all live in a watershed. When it rains, wherever you are, that rain has to go somewhere. And so here, we're mostly in the Fox River watershed. Most of us calling in tonight, I assume, are probably in the area in the Fox River watershed, maybe the Kishwaukee River watershed up north of us. If you're from east or south of us, you might be in the DuPage River watershed. But we're all in a watershed somewhere. Wherever you are on land, that rain has to go downhill, downstream somewhere. And that's which watershed you're in. The Fox River watershed specifically goes across Wisconsin and Illinois. There's 233 river miles associated with the Fox River. That's the length of the actual river meandering down. And it also includes 25 major tributary streams. So this is a big area. Over 1.5 million people live in this Fox River watershed with us. Now, speaking of wildlife in the Fox River watershed, of the 300 species of birds found in Illinois, 248 can be found in this watershed. That's pretty magnificent. And so that's why wildlife will be a big component of what we're talking about tonight as well. There are 96 species of fish and 32 species of mussels, depending on clean waterways in the Fox River watershed. And with all of this land and all of this area, there's a lot of beauty associated with that too. We have some really beautiful, unique ecosystems throughout our area in the Fox River Valley. All the way from the north to all the way from the south, there's different ecosystems, dry prairies, woodlands, beautiful bluffs down south, wetlands all over the place. It's a very neat, unique place. And I could go on and on about that, but I'll just say it's very beautiful in the area we live if we all just take a moment to stop and appreciate it. This slide was actually taken from the first presentation in the series too, but just had to show it again because it really highlights just how great of a landscape we have here. So the Fox River watershed is part of the Mississippi River watershed as a whole. We are specifically that pink area called the Upper Mississippi River Basin. And so the Fox River feeds into the Illinois River, which feeds into the Mississippi River. So we're all connected here, kind of as the heart and lungs of our country through this Mississippi River watershed. And there we go, there's my graphic. So to kind of demonstrate how all of these rivers and streams from up north eventually flow down south, I have a fun little clip to show you. Let's see, it's just not quite going. It worked again on the test run. And of course, when you get going here, then we're having issues. Well, I will just leave the link there. How's that? And it's a cool illustration that shows how all these rivers and streams flow down to the Mississippi River and then down through Louisiana into the Gulf of Mexico. And then this River Runner simulator can actually track an exact drop of water. You can put in an address. For this photo on the screen, I put in Gail Warden Library, who's hosting this webinar tonight. And you can see how that drop of water that lands by Gale Borden Library can make its way all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico through all of our waterways and the expanding watersheds that we are included in. But as all that water runs to the Gulf of Mexico, along with it comes the pollutants and the excess nutrients that are washed off the land through the entire Mississippi River watershed. So I'll just flip back to 2 screens ago, that huge pink area in the middle, that all of the area that is in that pink shade, that light pink shade, drains to the Mississippi River, Louisiana, and down to the Gulf of Mexico, and all the activity that happens on that land contributes to the water going into the Gulf of Mexico with the pollutants and excess nutrients, as I mentioned. So these excess nutrients that get washed down to the Gulf of Mexico for quite a long time have been causing what is called a hypoxic zone. This hypoxic zone, or it's a no oxygen zone is another word for it, is also called a dead zone. The excess nutrients that are flushed down the river feed an excess amount of bacteria, or I'm sorry, an excess amount of algae. That algae consumes all the oxygen in the water, both as it's growing and developing, but then also as it dies off, the decomposition process consumes the oxygen in the water as well. And it causes this hypoxic or dead zone where no marine life can survive, unfortunately. In the Gulf of Mexico, the size of this dead zone can vary from 5,000 square kilometers to over 22,000 square kilometers, which is the size of Massachusetts. So like the size of a state, that's the size that we have, unfortunately, down there, that does not support life. So Illinois does contribute to that, as we were seeing how a drop of water flows downstream. Specifically, Illinois sends the most phosphorus to the Gulf of Mexico and is the second largest contributor of nitrogen, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. So phosphorus and nitrogen are the nutrients we were talking of, and those two are what we put on a lot of our plants and apply with fertilizer, both on our lawns through farm practices, and those nutrients come from sewage treatment plants as well. And all of those sources eventually funnel down to the Gulf of Mexico, and creating these really problematic issues. But we do also see these impacts locally as well. So the same thing happens around here, right? We have excess nutrients in places along our rivers and our streams, or low flowing areas, ponds. And that's where we get those nasty algal blooms that are both harmful to people and wildlife, and low dissolved oxygen levels that impact our aquatic life and fish up here. You see this particularly behind dams, so where the water is slowed in impoundment areas. It causes nutrient buildups, again, that feed algal blooms, cause low dissolved oxygen in areas where fish and a variety of aquatic life just are unable to live throughout our systems. And so, unfortunately, all of us who live and work in this watershed do contribute to those conditions. If we scale back to our yards, when it rains, that water, again, has to go somewhere. And so it goes down the sewer system, usually into the nearest creek, stream, even directly to the Fox River sometimes. So this can include, right, whether it's across your grass, what's applied on your turf grass, what's applied on or what's around your driveways, parking areas, roads. All of these things, when it rains, can get washed into that stream system and cause issues to our own waterways and further downstream, as in the Gulf of Mexico. These things can include oil or dripping substances from our vehicles, litter that can be blown away and washed down into our gutter systems, or again, directly into the river. Road salt is another issue. Road salt, you might hear it referred to as chloride sometimes, because it's sodium chloride that is most of the road salt we use. That's the compound we use. And so road salt, which, you know, we do use to keep people safe, but there is a lot of it put down. It can be the fertilizer, the synthetic fertilizers that we spread on our lawns. That's the nitrogen and phosphorus part we were talking about. Other things that can get washed into our waterways include herbicides and pesticides that are readily applied across our landscape right now. And it can even include excess trees or excess leaves. I'm sorry, we love trees. Excess leaves, as we once had a system where those leaves could just fall and decompose in place, and now they're getting washed down off of our streets, our driveways, our sidewalks, right into the gutters, and the rivers and streams are seeing an excess amount of these leaves all at once. Again, leaves have nitrogen and phosphorus in them, so they're contributing to that nutrient load. And then you can see this cute little, you could call it an emoji, but that was like a little, you know, squishy character that you can get, but of poop right there. But this does extend to even our pet waste, right? So there we're talking about pet waste that is not picked up and cleaned up, and all that extra waste, and that's washed into our systems, again, contributes further to this nutrient load. The good news is we can all do something to help. So I know that was a little disheartening of a start. That's just kind of like the reality check. This is the situation we're in, but we can all do something to help. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight, what each of us can do. So let's start with pollution reduction. We talked about a lot of the things that can be flushed into our waterways. Big ones are nitrogen and phosphorus. Specifically here in Illinois, our soils are not lacking phosphorus. So even if we are applying synthetic fertilizers to maintain these perfect green turf grass areas, that's become a big thing across our country, we do not need to add phosphorus. So whenever you're looking at a fertilizer bag, if you are going to buy fertilizer from the store, I really encourage you to make sure that the second number listed is a 0. That's the number that indicates how much phosphorus is in that mix. The first one's nitrogen, second one's phosphorus, and the third one's usually potassium. And we don't need phosphorus and applied here. And phosphorus is one of the main components in our waterways that feeds the algae. So we really want to make sure we're reducing that as much as possible. I briefly mentioned how all that leaf litter getting washed into the storm drains can really cause a big influx of nutrients as well. So we do want to keep those leaves out of the gutters and out of the storm drains. A lot of communities have leaf collection programs now, which is really great. But if you do have a leaf collection program, make sure you keep those leaves and rake them up on your yard. The vac truck will still be able to get to them, but if they're raked into the gutter and into the actual road, that's when they can get washed down the easiest into the storm drains, or all the water running through them just picks up all of that organic matter and nitrogen within them, and really floods the system with all of those nutrients. Not to mention that the leaves that get washed in the storm drains also usually clog them and cause localized flooding, like the big ponds of water that you see in the middle of the road, that are not fun for anybody to deal with during a rainstorm. So we really want to clear out the gutters. If you ever see them get clogged, we want to make sure that we're preventing that localized flooding, but also keep those leaves up out of the gutter and out of the street in the first place. Better options for what to do with your leaves. The main one is to leave them in place. If you can, rake them into your flower beds, your gardens, around the base of trees. This acts as natural mulch. Again, as they break down, they release all those nutrients, and wouldn't you rather have that in your gardens and around the plants around your home to naturally fertilize them as they break down? But also, it's important to note that a lot of pollinators, are bees and insects, overwinter under those leaves and depend on them to stay warm through some of our cold winter conditions. So leaving those in place can do good in multiple ways. If you just have too many to do that, I know some of us are like, I have this beautiful giant oak or a giant maple tree that drops a ton of leaves. And I can't possibly rake them all into my garden. You can also mulch them in place into your lawn. Have them ground up. And again, then they're staying in place and breaking down in place like maybe they once would have. And if you have even more than that, feel free to add them to your compost pile. That's free fertilizer the next year if you're able to compost at home. We mentioned road salt. So we do want to reduce the use of road salt and the impact of that salt on our waterways, but also on our infrastructure, our plants. It tends to burn plants. It has a lot of negative results when we use too much road salts. And we found that there is a way to reduce the amount of road salt that you use, but still maintain safety in winter conditions. It's about putting down the right amount and using some other tactics as well. So the Conservation Foundation coordinates the Salt Smart Collaborative that has put together some great resources over many years. And yes, they're working with the huge snowplow companies and public works departments as well. But again, we can each do something at home about this. And they have some great resources and videos online to watch about what the impacts of road salt are, but then what we can each do about it as well. And they have specific things for your home as well, and some great resources. So I encourage you to check out saltsmart.org to find those out for next winter. Thankfully, we're coming into spring now, which is a fun time of year, but some good tips for next winter. And overall, we found that this pollution reduction is key, of course. Reducing the amount of these things that can even be washed into the rivers and streams in the first place is very important. But another factor that we want to talk about here today is how we can also protect ground or water by what is actually on the ground. We've seen that the more natural cover there is, that's talking about plants on the ground and plants with some deep roots going down. The more natural cover like that we have, the less runoff there is and more infiltration there is. Infiltration is the water, the amount of water that has time to kind of soak back down into the ground. That's infiltration. And that's a really good thing to both reduce the amount of water flushing down our rivers and stream systems at once, but the ground also kind of acts as a natural filtration point. So we want to get as much water back into the ground as possible and reduce the amount of runoff. And we've seen that with increased natural ground cover, that runoff is reduced and infiltration is greater. And then as we have more paved surfaces and buildings in place, the amount of runoff increases and the amount of infiltration decreases. So we want to talk about ways that we can actually keep water where it falls, again, to prevent flooding downstream, keep all that water from just rushing to a new place all at once, to allow that water to get back into the ground and be naturally filtered, and to keep it from washing all of those pollutants off into our waterways. But also keeping water where it falls helps prevent things like localized flooding. If we each look at our own little plot of the world that we call home, whatever that may be, and we try to keep the rain that comes down right there on that plot going back into the ground, that can really make a big difference. Imagine if everybody uphill of where this river or where this street is flooded, all of the houses uphill from there each had kept the water that fell on their property, or as much of it as they could, on their property and going back into the ground there, then even these smaller flooding issues in our neighborhoods and in our streets would be less, because there'd just be less water to go there. And so as we've seen more paved surfaces, more development and buildings, we now have to think about, in these hard surfaces, we now have to think about, okay, how can we kind of reverse that trend? How can we build in more green spaces, more natural areas or open spaces with the most beneficial plants that we can? How can we build in more green infrastructure like rain gardens? And so in this sense, conserving and protecting land and water means not only being mindful of the practices that are on the land and the development that's taking place, those things that fall under pollution reduction, but also what is physically on the land. And that really comes down to plants. So let's talk about the plants that can help our water. Native plants protect our water, habitat, and biodiversity the best. So we are advocates for utilizing, protecting, and increasing native plantings throughout our area. So native plants, so that way we're all on the same page. When I say that term, I'm talking about the species that are naturally found in our region or in our ecosystems here. They've evolved over thousands of years in this balanced ecosystem alongside native wildlife. So they both benefit each other to be in place. Native plants thrive in our area. They're used to the conditions we have here. They're used to really wet springs and really dry summers and the cold winters. So they can handle all those crazy conditions. And they also have very distinct and beneficial attributes that we'll go through a little bit. One of those attributes is their very, very deep roots. So I'll just take a moment and go over this figure that you see in front of you. So on the right, we have some native plant species. On the left, we have non-native plant species that we typically find as more decorative species in our area, and are used in landscaping and gardening still a lot. So on the right, you'll see some native grasses there, some really tall native grasses like big blue stem, but also some native grasses like prairie dropseed. It's the second one in from the division there. Prairie dropseed that only gets a few feet high, but look at how deep those roots go. The same for buffalo grass. That is actually a very short grass, but look at just how deep those roots go. And to put this into perspective, the scale shown on here, the numbers are actually in meters. So the buffalo grass is past 2.5 meters. Even black-eyed Susan, something that seems like a regular flower sometimes around here, and people don't always realize it's a native species. Black-eyed Susan goes down to 2 meters. That's 6 feet. That's a plant that's just a few feet above the ground and goes down into the earth at least 6 feet. And that's like most of our native plants. They are used to really wet areas, but they are also used to drier areas and have those really deep roots to make it through the hot winters, or I mean the hot summers. I'm getting tongue twisted a bit tonight. The really hot summers, and those deep-rooted prairie plants that shifted into wetland areas and woodland areas really have a really unique and neat structure to them. Now, conversely, we're looking at the other side. We're saying like, ooh, that's a hydrangea, daylilies. Those are things that we see out and about quite a bit. And as you can see, that's 0.5 meters. So that's just a foot or two down into the ground. That's much different than 6, 7, 8 feet down into the ground, specifically when we're talking about benefits. And I will call out the Kentucky bluegrass that you can barely see those roots there. And those only go a few inches into the ground. So they really don't have a root system to, one, break up dense soil and dirt. Those native plants, they can really, those roots can work their way down and really break up compact soil and earth. That is one barrier to water getting down into the ground. But two, those very shallow roots provide no channels for water to go any further, even if it is looser soil. So the prairie plants, when you're looking at those deep roots, each of those long roots act like just channels for the water to find its way down deep into the earth, and they just allow so much more water to go down into the earth quicker by being in place than our decorative species, and especially turf grass. So why do we want to use native plants again? We're talking about the water quality benefits and their deep roots, but I also can't pass up the opportunity to mention that they are really the base of our entire ecosystem. The insects, the bugs, the caterpillars all depend on the native plants, and then everything up the food chain depends on that as well. So if we really want to support our wildlife in our region, native plants are really the best thing to support that as well. And as we experience impacts of climate change, we know that more biodiverse ecosystems and environments are able to better adapt and be more resilient through those drastic changes. So we want to give all the beautiful things in our area the best chance they can against these big changes, and having these native plants in place that really can support the rest of that diverse system is a big piece actually in how we can support all of our wildlife moving forward. But one of the ways we can utilize native plants to specifically protect water quality and this flood resiliency that we're talking about is by installing a rain garden. So this is a green infrastructure feature that supports water infiltration with native plants. It's kind of a depression in the ground. You can plant that area with these native plants with deep roots. And then try to direct the water on your property, and the storm water, specifically the water that would normally run off of your property, into this area. So that way, when it rains, it has time to soak back into the ground and not just run off right after that rainstorm. In a residential setting, it can look something like this, where The water from your gutter can be directed towards this rain garden, or even off of your driveway or something, directed towards your rain garden and captured and have time to soak back into the ground before it runs into a gutter and then our rivers and streams. And I'll also mention the idea with the rain garden, as I'm talking about, it has a chance to soak into the ground. These features are usually designed and built, and especially again those native plants with the deep roots help get that water into the ground. So it holds it for a little while and gives it a chance to soak into the ground, but we're not talking about a pond here or anything that mosquitoes could live and breed in. It's just giving it that little bit extra time, and actually usually within a day or so, all that water should be soaked into the ground. So as I'm talking about rain gardens, I want to make sure we're talking about the soils in the rain gardens as well. We always want to jump right to like, oh, what can I plant there? Which is a really exciting conversation, but the soil is actually very important in a rain garden area as well. We have a lot of clay soils in our region here. And the bottom right of the screen, you'll see a figure that shows clay soils. And the clay has such fine particles and it's so compact together that it actually prevents a lot of water from filling in those spaces. It doesn't have many voids. Clay is just very fine particles that are really closely packed, and it does not leave a lot of room for water to go into it. So if we're thinking about a rain gardens feature, we really encourage amending the soils. We call it first, when you're mixing other things in, and mixing in some more sand or even organic matter like compost. And both of those things create more voids and space within the soil itself to hold more water. Okay, but then we get to talk about the plant selection, right? So when we're talking about building a rain garden, I always recommend starting first with this group of plants called sedges. It's in the upper right-hand corner there. So sedges, they look like grasses, but they're not. It's a separate area of plants, a separate group of plants. But they can range from maybe 12 inches. There's some that are 8 to 12 inches. There's some that are more in the 1 to 2 foot range. But that's a nice height as well for a garden setting. But these sedges do really well with wet feet. So putting kind of sedges in your rain garden first can really create a nice structure base to make sure it looks like a full lush garden all year round as you have different flowers popping up among it. But I love to point out that there are so many beautiful native plants that thrive in these wet conditions. Again, we used to have a really beautiful wetland systems, which we do have some great wetland systems still in existence here that we've worked to preserve, but there are a lot of native species that are used to those wet feet then, right? And being in wetter soils more consistently. So putting them in this rain garden feature is perfect. They like having wet soils. They like having tons of moisture around them. With that being said, again, they're native plants, so they're used to drier summers. So if the area does dry out later in the summer, they'll be fine, no worries. But the plants shown here on the screen are some of my favorites. Actually, in the next couple slides, all the plants you'll see are ones that are in my own rain garden at our previous home. So I can point out the bee balm, the cardinal flower, the great blue lobelia here. All of those, you can see that they kind of have a thin entryway to get to the nectar. There's long, thin entryways, and the hummingbirds love those. Of course, they love the red of the cardinal flower, but even things like the bee balm and the lobelia. There's another red native flower called royal catchfly, and the hummingbirds just love that. In the bottom left, we've got our native iris. Not all irises are native, so that's important to note. Most of them that we see around are actually not native species. They're other species that can kind of get out of control sometimes. But we do have a native iris called the blue flag iris. That's this pretty blue purple color. And all these things like the wetter areas and would do great in a rain garden. Other plants. These are just some additional plants that would do well in a rain garden as well. Butterfly milkweed specifically. That is a milkweed variety that stays somewhat smaller, only like 2 to 3 feet high. Really 2 feet, I think, is more the norm for that one. But it gets these beautiful bright orange flowers and provides the same benefits for the monarchs as common milkweed that you might think of when people say milkweed, but it is not as aggressive as common milkweed. It doesn't, you know, spread all over and get 6 feet tall everywhere. It's a really great landscaping plant, this butterfly milkweed. And then we've got prairie blazing star in the purple and rattlesnake master in that same picture on the far left. And there's just a lot of really neat plants once you start diving into it that love these conditions. Your rain garden feature can kind of be more of a natural setting, or it can be more of a structured setting, like this one. This one was just installed when the picture was taken. That's why the plants look so small. But you can see this is strategically placed to divert the water off of a parking area down to the rain garden and keep it from going into the storm drain. Additional considerations if you're thinking about putting in a rain garden and trying to assess where to put that. Certainly look for a location that's downflow of the natural water flow. Water is going to go where it wants to go, so you want to work with that system. And if you say, okay, here's the low spot that when a rainstorm hits, I see the water coming to this area, that's a good area for your rain garden. You can divert though, like downspouts and water coming from your driveway or something like that to that area as well. But over your lawn, if it's flowing just over your regular turf grass into an area, you're definitely going to want to make sure that you're downflow. You want to think about infiltration rates. We had mentioned the soil again. You want to amend that soil a little bit. And if there's an area that is already pretty wet in your yard regularly, that's actually not the spot where you want to put a rain garden specifically. That could be a spot where you could just plant a garden full of these beautiful native plants that love wet feet. But if we're talking a rain garden as a green infrastructure piece to capture the stormwater right before it goes off your property or anywhere else and get it back into the ground, that area that's already wet, that means that the soil there is already completely full of water and can't take any more in. So we don't actually want to put our rain garden feature there. We want to put it slightly uphill, upflow somewhere of that to catch some of that water before it even gets to that spot, because that means the water is just not going through the ground in that location. And again, our goal is to kind of get water back into the ground and keep it from needing to flow off anywhere else. And then I'll throw out too, we want to think about trees, right? I had a pretty small yard at my previous home, so I didn't have a choice to avoid all the nearby trees. It was just a pretty small yard. I'm like, I need to catch the water before it goes off my property. So it's kind of got to be here. But then as you're digging to amend the soils and kind of create that depression for the water to go into, the tree roots are difficult to dig around, and you also don't want to damage the tree. So we had to be very, very careful with that. So if you can just avoid being right under or near a tree, that usually makes installation of a rain garden better. With that being said, of course, there's native plants that love living under a tree and in the shade too. So by all means, that might be a great place for just a regular garden. I'll just pitch that. A good shade garden with some beautiful wild geraniums or something. I would encourage you to put some sort of path through your rain garden. One, this helps people like me go through, not just when you're doing maintenance, or you know, tidying up your plants, but it helps you be able to get in there and enjoy the space and look on each of those milkweed plants to see if there are monarch caterpillars on them. But most importantly, it's also to kind of confine where you're stepping, so that way you're not compacting all of the soil around. Again, the purpose of a rain garden is to kind of looser soils with more space around them so the water can go into the ground as quickly as possible and sit in that space as it soaks even deeper into the ground and along all those root systems of those native plants. So you don't want to be stepping everywhere and compacting that soil. That kind of defeats the purpose of a rain garden. And then I'd also encourage you to think about bloom times and trying to plan out species that flower all throughout the growing season: spring, early summer, late summer, fall, even late fall. So that way you have colors to enjoy all year round, but then also the wildlife in the area has some great habitat all year round. We have some great examples in our area. The King County Government Center has a beautiful rain garden behind it. This is the Government Center in Geneva. This is a good example too of having different bloom times. This is the same exact garden. Top pictures in June when butterfly milkweed was blooming, and then the bottom pictures more September-ish when the bee balm or monarda, black-eyed Susan, yellow-headed coneflower, a lot of other things are blooming. So they had different flushes of plants going through and providing habitat throughout the year. Last year, the King County Farm Bureau put in this really cool rain garden in the shape of Illinois. It diverts water from their entire parking lot and actually a bit from the giant Costco parking lot that's over there too into this area and catches it before it goes into the ditch area on the bottom of the screen there in the left picture. There is an overflow there in case we just get too much water that the rain garden can't take it all. It can overflow into the ditch still, but this rain garden is so large that it will be able to take most of the storms. You can see the great planting effort that went on last year, and they actually made the channels where the water would flow into the garden out of stone and mimicked our waterways in Illinois here, our major waterways. So the water is kind of diverted down these simulated rivers, which is really fun. As you're thinking about what plants to put where in your rain garden, there is, we have a guide called Build Your Own Rain Garden on our website. And it's got some great plant suggestions in there, along with kind of more information on the layout and everything that I was trying to mention today or briefly talk through. But we also have a guide on a wide array of other native plants, so you can work to incorporate these throughout your other gardens, or even create additional native plant pollinator gardens on your property. Any addition of native plants with those deep roots and less turf grass lawn overall will contribute to water infiltration, water conservation, and a healthier landscape. And another great resource are these Meet Our Native Plant guides that the Wild Ones created for the Start in Your Yard initiative. These plant guides have beautiful pictures of kind of the zoomed in flowers or a zoomed in view of the species and what it can look like more in a landscape or a garden setting, so you get both of those views. But they also have companion plants listed with these, and that is extremely helpful. If you look down at this bottom left one, the rattlesnake master, okay, I think this is a cool plant and I want to put it in, but what could be planted with it? Rattlesnake master can handle some of these wetter areas, and you can see that the companion plants include blazing star, butterfly milkweed, royal catchfly, these things that I mentioned. wild geranium there right in the center. That's the one I threw out for a shade garden. And on that Meet Our Native Plant Guide, you can see other companion plants that also like shady environments. So you can get a good idea of other species that would go well with whatever plant you're trying to put in or thinking about putting in like those same conditions. As you're working native plants into your landscape, we can do kind of this wild and free look. But you can also do the native and neat look too, if more the meadow look is not for you. There's a lot of different ways to work these native plants into a landscape and get deeper roots out there. And so we're talking a lot about rain gardens and plants, and I just wanted to also mention another way that can be really good to keep water where it lands. Again, that's kind of the goal that we're talking about here today, and that's with a rain barrel. So a rain barrel, the idea is that it catches the water that runs off your roof into your gutters and holds it to use at a later time when there isn't less rain, and then you don't have to pull that rain out or that water out of your spigot to water during those dry times either. So it both helps get the water back into the ground and reduce the amount of water that you're using for watering overall. So I've thrown out a lot of ideas and resources here today, and we know it can be intimidating to kind of start on this process. So we have this program called Conservation at Home for residents to kind of try to help guide you through both the first steps or the next steps that you can do in creating an environmentally friendly backyard. We have this checklist of items that you can do right at home. There's different categories. There's the native vegetation that we did touch on today. We were mostly talking about the stormwater management category. And then it also includes ideas on yard management. That does include like mulching your leaves back into the yard or using compost like we mentioned, and thinking about greater wildlife habitat. So this checklist is intended to kind of help get you started down the right path. But then also you can ultimately work up into getting your yard certified to both celebrate the work you did and let your neighbors know what you're doing, and hopefully encourage them to do the same thing. You may think, when we were looking at that whole Mississippi River watershed and how big it is, okay, does it really matter if I put in a rain barrel or a rain garden at home? Well, just through the Conservation at Home program, we have over 4,000 certified properties now. That's not even people working on things at home who have started to implement things. Those are actually certified properties. So when you think about 4,000 certified properties, that collective impact does matter, and you are making a difference. That's throughout our entire region. That's a whole network of properties that are keeping more water on their own property, that are providing landing points for wildlife moving through and around the area, where there used to kind of be deserts or no place for them to really land and fully utilize. And now they have a whole network. So it does add up, and it does matter what you're doing at home. We're overall just really aiming to make the landscape more functional for us. Rather than having turf grass with short roots, we want to have native plants that you see on the right side of the path here that are low maintenance and flourishing with their deep roots, even in the hot summers, that support water quality and wildlife habitat, rather than having eroded pond shores with algae issues. We want to have stable shorelines, right, with native plants that filter those nutrients and pollution before it even reaches the water body. And so this can even be scaled up to your homeowners association as well if you live in an area that has an HOA. We also work with HOAs to naturalize detention basins, and you could be an advocate for that or bring that to your HOA board and ask about how are they managing the common areas. How can we work in native plants? How can we naturalize this shoreline around our detention basin to have greater benefits to the water and our community surrounding the area? We do have a parallel program to conservation at home called Conservation at Work. This is for businesses wanting to do environmentally friendly practices. And then I'd also encourage you on the community scale to further advocate for green infrastructure, again, naturalized detention basins throughout your community, protecting natural areas and open space that also provide these benefits because they have large amounts of native plants there, and even thinking about flood preparedness. And so when I say advocate to your community, I mean, talk to your neighbors, but also talk to your city council, your environmental commissions, your public works departments, and try to encourage these practices throughout so we can make that network of great resources and keeping the water where it lands even greater. And we can work towards mitigating water quality impacts by addressing the sources of the pollution again. And so this is just pointing out again that advocating for some of these good practices can go a long way, and each individual person can be part of that. And then here at the end, I just thought I'd throw in, this is a slide from the first presentation again to bring it all the way back around. This link on the EPA's website called How's My Waterway? You can just search that and this will come up. Shows you what issues are in your local waterway, whether that be the stream near you or even the full Fox River, the Illinois River. You can search and see the condition of your waterways around you to know if they're improving, if new issues have come up, and what you might be able to do to help improve those issues based on some of the suggestions here tonight. I'll leave you with a few resources in order to, if you're looking to find native plants. The Conservation Foundation has a spring plant sale coming up on May 11th. Kim was nice enough to mention that at the start. That's at McDonald Farm. And we'll also have veggie plants for sale there in addition to native plants. The Wild Ones of Greater King County always have their sale. Kim mentioned that as well. I didn't see the date online yet, so I didn't have that actually in my presentation, but you saw the whole list from Kim. Or heard it. And then if you're looking for local nurseries that sell native plants throughout the area, throughout the entire growing season, we've got a list of those on our website as well. Coming up in spring here, we've got rain barrel sales and compost bin sales coming up. Local rain barrel sales and pickup events, which is great. It helps save on shipping costs. Those links are currently getting set up right now. But if you just search upcycleproducts.com and look on the Illinois programs tab, you'll see all the communities in the area that we're working with to provide these rain barrel sales. They're usually going on end of April, May into June. We've got programs getting set up in Elgin, South Elgin, Batavia, St. Charles, a Kane County countywide sale, all the way down to Montgomery, Aurora, even Oswego. And so there's sales going on all up and down the Fox River if you're looking to get a rain barrel this spring. Coming up, Kim did already mention the Babbling Brooks presentation that the Wild Ones is putting on next week, as well as the Conservation Foundation's Earth Day benefit. Supporting our local conservation organizations is another great thing that people can do throughout the area to support our water quality and land and quality of life. But if you're interested in hearing more about the Fox River itself, we do have a series going on in St. Charles called A River Flows Through It on the third Wednesday of each month. The next one's coming up on March 20th. Yep, that's tomorrow night. And that's at the Baker Community Center as well. And it's going to be on what lives below. So life at the bottom of the Fox River, which we don't always get to hear about. Pam Otto at the St. Charles Park District is going to be doing that talk, and she's a really great speaker. Other ways that you can get involved, I would really just encourage you to follow us on social media, whatever platform you like to use, explore our YouTube channel. We've got a variety of different topics and presentations there. I'd also encourage you to explore the Wild Ones startinyouryard.com page that also has some great resources on it, and great recordings, not just from this year, but from years past. They have the Meet Our Native Plant guides on there, as well as really just a tremendous resource for everything we talked about here today. You can also find that on startinyouryard.com. And I would encourage you to follow both of our organizations, or sign up for our newsletter, because the events Kim mentioned at the start of the presentation, these ones that I'm just flying through here at the end, those will all come out in our newsletters, right? Rain barrel sales, plant sales. We'll be trying to continuously share and get as much information out to all of you interested as possible. So if you sign up for our newsletters, you'll be notified of when all that fun stuff is coming out. But if you want more information on either the Conservation at Home program or Start in Your Yard, I've got some links listed here. We're both programs, both organizations, the Conservation Foundation and Wild Ones, are always happy to be here as a resource, answer any questions you have. We both go out and try to do consultations and actually give you advice in your yard on where to start. I should have mentioned that with the Conservation at Home program, that we actually are able to go out and say, hey, you've got a problem area here. Here's some suggestions that I would give on how to address that issue with, standing water in that area, or a really dry spot that you can't get something to grow. Here's some plants I'd put there. We're both able to kind of get you started or help support the process if you're already started, or get you certified. In the Elgin area, really, I'd say Start in Your Yard is the great first step. They're really the experts in the area, and our Conservation at Home program kind of feeds into that afterwards and builds on all the great stuff that Start in Your Yard is doing in the area. So with that, that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I know that
Thank you,
We're
Jessica.
gonna pitch that up. Hi there.
Yeah. Oh, that was just fabulous. And I have a comment here who says just what I'm thinking. Great job, Jessica. That's from Elizabeth Copeland. And then we have a few questions. One is about diverting parking lot or driveway water into a rain garden. They're asking, won't that also bring oils, gas, and other pollutants?
Some, yeah, but it'll filter.
Okay, yeah. So the question is, when we divert it off of the parking lots, won't that bring those the pollutants that we were talking about? And it does, right? It'll keep that water in the rain garden. Yes, it'll divert that water to your garden area. But our main goal here is to keep them out of the rivers and streams, because it does have to go somewhere. And we don't want it going into our waterways that people use as drinking water, and that are our natural areas for a lot of our aquatic wildlife, that, just like our native plants, support a whole ecosystem above them as well. We don't want it going in there, and it does have to go somewhere. So if we divert it to a rain garden area, that water can go back into the ground in that spot, and our soils and the many things. That's a topic for almost a whole nother day. I know you actually did a series on soil last year, of the complexities and life that is in soil itself. And soil actually almost acts like a natural filtration device. There's the oils and things from our cars, and a lot there are microorganisms or bacteria in the soil that can actually break those down over time. So we do want those things. We would prefer they go into the ground, but the very first step is to prevent them in the first place, right? So that's where we encourage you to check for oil leaks on your cars. decrease the amount of salt that's put on that parking lot in the first place, because yeah, too much salt going into the rain gardens or any bioswales or your garden areas, it will probably burn the plants. So let's reduce those up front, and then anything else that's getting washed off, let's get it into a garden space where it can go back down and be naturally filtered into the earth, rather than running off into our waterways. That's kind of like an immediate hit of not good stuff to our environment, to put it gently. Yeah.
There's another question here. How close can the native plants be to a house foundation? Is there a problem with them growing into the foundation?
That's a great question. So our native plant roots, even though they have pretty large root systems, they're quite fine and thin and fibrous. It's not like a big tree root or anything like that. When we're talking about more the vegetative layer, because of course we have native trees and shrubs too that are great to work into our landscape. But when we're talking about our regular native plants, they have actually quite fine root systems that aren't going to be those big roots that plow into foundations and ruin them. I would say for a rain garden feature, you don't want that right next to your foundation, because that's meant to gather and hold more water, and you don't want water right next to your foundation. So I would say at least 10 feet, if not more, if you could do, 25 feet from your foundation to do a rain garden feature, that'd probably be best. But just in general, the native plants, I have, black-eyed Susan planted in a little strip between a sidewalk and our house foundation, and it doesn't cause any issues. And that was in our previous home that was also a 100-year-old house that had an old rock foundation. So those deep roots are actually helping get that water into the ground, and not making that water force another way, another avenue out of sight, which could be your foundation.
And then an anonymous attendee asks whether there's a problem with roof material contaminating the water in the rain barrel.
That's a great question. And it does depend on what roofing material is on your home, how old it is, right? So that is a real concern. And so our garden plants and our native plants, it won't bother them. And again, we'd rather have that runoff going into the ground rather than right into the rivers and streams all at once. But I personally don't use rain barrel water too much for my vegetable gardens or anything. The graphic I had up did have it going to a vegetable garden, and that's a great question, because I actually just use my rainwater for my house plants or any native plants I'm trying to get established, because you will need to maybe water them and take care of them for the first year or so. But overall, the rain barrel water is actually preferred by those plants versus tap water that has chlorine in it and some other things. That natural rainwater actually I've found helps them thrive a lot better.
Holly Hudson is asking, where can buffalo grass best be used in northeastern Illinois? Has it been shown to be viable on a large scale as a lawn grass, or is it better used as part of a native plant garden?
That is a great question, Holly. So I have seen it used in larger scales. We have some natural areas, specifically Campton Township open space, have been using buffalo grass on some of their trail systems. So that way it stays low, right? And people can still walk in the area. But man, does that have deep roots. So that's way better than turf grass there. And because it's a native grass, it also doesn't pose an invasive risk to prairie habitats you're trying to get established. But I have seen they were experimenting there a little bit with mixes, because they were doing kind of like a sedge buffalo grass mix. Buffalo grass greens up a little bit later, so you do want something green and alive if people are hiking in the spring. But one of the well-known restoration ecologist in the area, has buffalo grass as his whole open lawn area, and then prairie around it as well. So I have seen it in larger applications like that, and it's pretty neat to see. Of course, it looks a little bit different than turf grass, so it's just kind of managing expectations there. It might not look exactly like and feel exactly like turf grass, but it'll stay low and be a nice green space still for any activities, but be native and have deep roots.
Wow. Pamela Morong asks, will native plants grow on a hill?
Absolutely. A hill is one of the first locations I'd put native plants because nobody wants to mow a hill. And there's often a lot of erosion issues on hills. So native plants will absolutely grow on a hill. Those deep roots will grab hold and even create better structure and prevent erosion than a lot of other plants. I would say if you're trying to get things established, depending on how steep the hill is, I would put actual plant plugs in, like little starters in rather than seed, depending on the time of year, I guess, and again, how big the slope is and how big the area is, but putting the actual plants in to just have a one-up and get started and growing a little quicker can help with that establishment. So you don't like put some seed down and before they can get established a week later have a giant rainstorm or something that comes through.
One last question. People are asking whether it will be possible to have access to the PowerPoint itself. I should say the recording will be on our website and at the libraries, the library channel. So you'll be able to see the entire presentation again. But anyway, I'll ask about the PowerPoint.
Yeah, well, we'll try to work that out, Nancy. Hopefully
Okay.
it's not too big or anything to share. I'm not sure. We'll have to figure that out for you. But yeah, the recording will be available. And all the resources I mentioned today, other than, some graphics for the watershed, are all on the Conservation Foundation's webpage, on our Conservation at Home tab. All those guides and everything are there, or the startinyouryard.com. That's where a ton of the other resources and Meet Our Native Plants and everything were too. So really those 2 pages will hopefully get you started at least.
Well, Jessica, you just did such a satisfying job of wrapping up the entire watershed series. You just are so wonderful and easy to listen to and so informative. And I always learn something new, no matter what the topic is. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I know this just is one more thing for you to have to do. You're very generous to share your time with us and your knowledge. Thank you.
Always a pleasure working with you all. The Wild Ones are a great group, so I encourage everybody to sign up for their newsletter and get involved. They're great people to be around, and it was great talking to you here tonight. I know we flew through some stuff, but reach out if there's any other questions, though. We're here.
Well, it is a real mutual admiration society with Wild Ones and the Conservation Foundation. Thanks,
Great.
Jessica.